In 2005, Danjuma Ibrahim, the then Deputy Commissioner of Police, allegedly made an advance at a young lady at a club, but this lady rudely turned down his advances. Ibrahim then stormed out of the club and told the policemen at a checkpoint on Gimbiya Street that he had sighted a gang of armed robbers. When the lady, Augustina, and her boyfriend Ifeanyi and 4 of their other friends arrived at this checkpoint, Ibrahim Danjuma blocked them. The policemen then opened fire on their Peugeot saloon car on the orders of Danjuma Ibrahim, and 4 of them dropped on the spot. Augustina and another friend, Anthonis, survived, but the policemen drove them to the station, put a weapon in Anthonis' mouth and finished him off. Then they put a ligature around Augustina's neck and finished her off as well. Before I go into details, kindly subscribe to my channel and please watch this video to the very end. Welcome to Nigeria, a place where anything goes, including silencing a woman for turning down your advances because you are a man of power. On June 7, 2005, Ifeanyi Ozo, Chinedu Menero, Augustina Arebu, Anthony Nwokike, Paulinus Ogbonna, and Ekene Isaac Mbe were driving home from a nightclub when they encountered a team of policemen on patrol at Garki Junction in Abuja. So let's rewind back so that you understand how this all began. It all began on the night of June 7, 2005. Ifeanyi Ozo, whose girlfriend Augustina Arebu was visiting, decided to, give her a treat. So he invited his friends to come along. Ifeanyi, who is originally from Eziago in, I think, Enugu State, was raised in Zamfara State. He was a motor spare part merchant at Apo Mechanic Village at Abuja, the nation's capital. He moved to Abuja to, open up his own business after many years of apprenticeship. People who knew him said that he was a real hard worker, Ifeanyi was just a young man. He was in his mid-20s. I think he was 25 years old at the time, but he was like the major breadwinner of his family. He had other siblings. I think there were 5 other siblings, and he also had his parents whom he was taking care of at the time. So you can imagine the amount of work and effort he put into his business. He was so determined to succeed that he put his all into this business of his, and it grew. He even opened up a second shop which was, managed by his younger brother who was staying with him at the time. Ifeanyi had this group of friends that he hung out with. They were all Igbo boys. They were 4 in numbers between the ages of 21 to 25. I mean, it was right there at their Apo mechanic site that they all met. So they became friends. And, he was now friends with Chinedu Mediro, Anthony Nwokike, Paulinus Ogbonna, and Ekene Isaac Mbe, they were either traders or auto mechanics at their Apo Mechanic Village as well. So they developed this strong friendship that grew into a brotherhood. Basically, they at all times usually had each other's backs. It was a brotherhood. They had each other's back. If someone needed money for something, they would always come through. If someone was in trouble, they would always come through for the person. So that was the reason why when Ifeanyi's girlfriend Augustina came to visit from Edo State, I think she came from Benin City, precisely from Edo State, his friends all came together, to make her visit memorable. Augustina and Ifeanyi had just started dating. In fact, their relationship was relatively new, but Ifeanyi was so into it. He was so into Augustina. He loved her very much. He adored his girlfriend and didn't hesitate to tell anyone who cared to listen about her. Ifeanyi's younger brother would later on say that Ifeanyi wouldn't stop raving about Augustina. I mean, he loved her very much. So on that day, Augustina arrived at Abuja. They chose to go to a club at Grand Mirage Hotel, which is, this popular hotel at Port Harcourt Street off Gimbiya Street, Garki, Abuja. I think I know the place too. They didn't have a car of their own to go to this place, so they basically borrowed the vehicle of one of their clients, which he had dropped out for repairs, to take Augustina out to flex. Now, when they got to the club, all was fine. The guys were all regulars at the club, so they were well known at the place. Ifeanyi was so happy Augustina was around, so they drank and danced, and basically they were just having fun and enjoying the time of their lives. It was there at the Grand Mirage Hotel that Augustina also caught the eye of a police officer who was also there to hang out. In fact, at the time, this man was the Deputy Commissioner of Police. He was DCP Danjuma Ibrahim. So Danjuma Ibrahim noticed the beautiful Augustina and he allegedly began to make advances at her. At first, it started off with glances, then he began to send drinks to the table for her. Listen, this is something that is common with uniform men in Nigeria, right? Whether they are putting on the uniform at that time or not, even if they are not putting it on, they believe that they are superior to everyone else. If not, how can a man make advances towards a woman he can clearly see was with another man if he was not looking for trouble? Make it make sense. Yes, he was a deputy police commissioner, quite okay. So does that give him the right to another man's woman? Augustina still ignored this man, but what he did next will cause a chain of reactions that would culminate in Augustina's visit to Abuja being her very first and last, as this would be the last time anyone will see her and her friends alive, basically. So, Danjuma Ibrahim walks up to the table Augustina was seated with her boyfriend and his friends, and he began to ask her out. Augustina was very disgusted with the audacity of the deputy police commissioner. So she rudely turned him down and told him to please stay away from her. I mean, it was her first visit to Abuja to visit her man, and this older man wouldn't just let her be. Angered by the way Augustina spoke to him, Danjuma Ibrahim stormed out of the club. He was cursing and swearing to, deal with Augustina and her friends, I meant to say, because of obviously everything that had happened, how things went down in their presence. And they had in fact even chimed in at some point and made it clear to him to stop bugging Augustina. So there was this sort of, argument that ensued before he stormed out of the place. Danjuma's ego was bruised. Who was Augustina to turn him down, and who were these other riffraffs to ridicule him? He was the deputy commissioner of police. He could do whatever he wanted, including having any woman he so desires, even if she was in the company of 5 other men. So what he did was that he drove straight to the checkpoint closest to the hotel. It was just down the street from, Grand Mirage, the club where they were at. He knew that if anyone was driving out of that hotel, they will most likely pass that checkpoint. No, in fact, they will. You have to pass through that checkpoint if you are leaving Grand Mirage. So this man tells the other police officers on duty, that's the policemen at the checkpoint, that he has just sighted a group of armed robbers. The description Ibrahim Danjuma gave to them were those of Augustina and her boyfriend Ifeanyi and the other 4 friends. He told them that there were 5 boys and a lady, that he had in fact sighted them and that they were actually headed towards their way. This man knew that there were no thieves. This man knew that Ifeanyi, Augustina and the other friends were no thieves. These were just a group of young men and a woman who had rejected his advances. Labeling them armed robbers was just his way of, dealing with them. So he and the other policemen, stayed put at the checkpoint and waited for the group. So now see, if they really thought they were armed robbers, why did they not go after them? Why did they not go after the armed robbers? Why did they have to wait for them at a checkpoint? What if the armed robbers didn't come to pass through that way? Meanwhile, when the night was over for the group, they got into the Peugeot 406 they had come with and they began to drive back home. As soon as they got closer to that checkpoint, Ibrahim Danjuma sights them and he now asks his men to block the vehicle they were in. Now, there was no reason for him to do this. Ordinarily, if this was, a stop and search, the police would have searched the vehicle and then whatever happens after then happens, but it didn't go down like that. When Ibrahim Danjuma blocked that vehicle, him and his fellow police officers got into an argument with the guys, that's Ifeanyi and the others. The argument was, obviously about how he was turned down by Augustina at the club and how disrespected he was just a couple of hours earlier. Instead of this man to accept that Augustina didn't just want him, he got into an argument with them, and then what he did next was so heartless that it will shock the entire country and bring to the forefront the issues of extrajudicial in Nigeria. So Danjuma Ibrahim ordered his fellow police officers to waste everybody in that Peugeot 406. I mean, all 6 of them. He gave them the order to open fire on these innocent men and women, basically. So the police opened fire on them without asking questions. I mean, the order came from a whole deputy commissioner of police. So they did as he commanded. 4 of the guys dropped immediately and they passed away at the spot. These were Ifeanyi, Chinedu, Paulinus, and Ekene. Augustina, the only girl, and Anthonis survived the initial onslaught. Even though they were, harmed, they sustained some degrees of injuries, but Ibrahim Danjuma and his men were not going to let them live. No, they decided to finish them off, making sure that there was no living witness. But before that, they took the survivors, that's Augustina and Anthony, to their police station to question them. I mean, what are they questioning them for? They actually put a ligature on Augustina and pulled at it until she gave up the ghost. To cover their tracks, they claimed that Anthony and Augustina were trying to escape from custody, Like how? Their bodies were already riddled in bullets. Where were they going to? There's a second version to this story though that describes how all of this went down. So one of the policemen who witnessed all of this has said that it was Danjuma Ibrahim himself who blocked the group on that fateful night. Then he took the weapon for himself and fired at them, taking the lives of the 4 men before conveying the 2 survivors to Garki police station. It was also said that he was the person who actually asphyxiated Augustina by himself. Whichever one we choose to believe, this event did actually happen. I mean, Danjuma did what he did, and these children, these guys and this girl actually lost their life in the process. And Danjuma was the person who orchestrated all of this. Now, that morning being the 8th, Ifeanyi's younger brother, whose name was Elvis, by the way, got to the Apple market where his brother's shop was. He didn't see his brother, the night before. He hadn't come home either, but he didn't think much of it. By this time, the story was already, making rounds and circulating in the market, but no one wanted to tell Elvis what had happened to his brother just yet. But eventually, a friend of his had to tell him, why everyone was looking at him weirdly. So Elvis had to get himself as quickly as he could to the Garki police station where he got the full details of what had happened. That's the version the police officers decided to tell. They were actually labeling Ifeanyi and his friends as armed robbers who were gunned down in a fire exchange with police officers. So after taking the lives of this man and woman, the police had planted weapons on the bodies of these Igbo traders and brought a photographer. Actually, they brought a photographer to take their pictures, which they displayed for the public to see, with the intentions of, convincing the public that the Apo 6 were armed robbers. Actually, when news broke about what had happened, everyone was kind of shocked. There was public outrage. In fact, people were angry all across Abuja. The youth began to, protest and, destroy properties. They started from the Apo Mechanic Village, the market where these guys worked. For more than a week, there was rioting and protests, and lots of properties were destroyed in the process. The guys, co-traders, refused to believe that they were armed robbers. They knew who these guys were. They knew that something else had happened to these guys. So they targeted the Apo and Garki police stations. And one thing I hadn't mentioned was that these police officers, led by Danjuma Ibrahim, had also buried the 6 bodies behind the police station. They didn't release the bodies to the families. I am guessing they didn't want an autopsy to be performed on them, so that, their lives are not exposed. They basically wanted to cover their tracks. How then are the families of this deceased supposed to feel? How are their friends and, their loved ones who know for sure that they are not armed robbers supposed to react? Following the outcry and protest, a panel of inquiry was set up by the then President Olusegun Obasanjo, and it was headed by Justice O.O. Goodluck. This was now months after the incident, right? So, the bodies were now ordered to be exhumed. and an autopsy was then performed on all the bodies, and the results showed that all 6 were shot at close range, with Augustina being asphyxiated. This was contrary to what the police had told everyone who cared to listen. They said that there was exchange with the 6 deceased individuals from a distance, and all they did was to defend themselves. That's why they did what they did to them, but none of that could be proved. Another information that was very vital was that before Anthony's life was snuffed out after he had survived the first attack, he had somehow managed to tell his elder brother Edward what had really happened. Someone was quite aware of what was going on and how it went down before, the police came back to finish him and Augustina off. So the story was that after the initial onslaught, the police took Anthony and Augustina to the Garaki police station, where a DPO, Othman Abdusalam, was in charge at the time. And Othman Abdusalam called Augustina and Anthony's families to pay up the sum of 5,000 for their release at that hour of the night. It was why Anthony was allowed to talk to his people to ask for the money that he quickly narrated what had happened to his brother in Igbo language. So they were not understanding what he was telling his brother in Igbo, but he was actually narrating how they were at the club, how Danjuma Ibrahim had approached Augustina, and how the other ones, met their end. Anthony's bravery is the reason we now know the truth of what had happened that day. If he wasn't wise enough to relay what transpired to Edwin, all we will have now will be hearsay. The way the police handled Anthony after this was very disgusting. I don't know if they figured he had told his family something that, incriminated them, but they actually left the request for the money and had actually taken Anthony's life in a very sickening way by placing the weapon in his mouth and taking him out, execution style, basically. These are men who were supposed to serve and protect, but they did what they did to Anthony and Augustina without thinking twice. Now, the judicial panel, after the inquiry, found the accounts of events of the police to, be false. So they recommended that Deputy Commissioner of Police Ibrahim Danjuma be arrested with his co-policemen and put on trial. Danjuma Ibrahim and 5 other accused policemen were arrested and charged to court. These were Emmanuel Baba, Ezekiel Achejene, Nicholas Zakaria, Sadiq Salam, and Abdusalam Othman, the DPO. 8 other witnesses also, were called in, and they testified that the Deputy Commissioner of Police, as Danjuma Ibrahim himself, had given the order to take the lives of all 6 of the young men and women. The photographer who testified as a witness also said that he was called to the police station to come take pictures of the group at that ungodly hour of the night, According to him, he took the pictures twice. The first time, there was no weapons on the bodies, but the second time, the police placed weapons on them and asked him to snap the pictures again. This was the picture that, they circulated to the nation, labeling this group as an armed robbery gang. It was an afterthought, They felt like the first picture didn't do justice, it wasn't convincing enough. So they manipulated the situation, basically. So you see how these people are willing to go to do anything, to go to any extent to cover their own evil deeds. In the meantime, the police placed all the officers involved on suspension pending further investigations. But Ibrahim Danjuma, who ordered the whole thing and even allegedly Augustina for rejecting his advances at the Garaki police station, was released on what the court called exceptional and special medical bail in August of 2006, which was just less than a year into the trial. You can imagine that. He was the orchestrator, but he was the first person to be released on bail. Years went by, 12 full years went by, and after so much back and forth and after several court proceedings, the court finally said that the apostates were indeed innocent. They were not armed robbers as claimed. Nigerians already knew this, so it didn't come as a shock. But what came as a shock was that the police officers were found not guilty. Only 2 of the 5 officers, Emmanuel Baba and Ezekiel Achejene, were actually convicted and given the capital punishment for the part they played in the crime. The other 3, that's Nicholas Zakaria and Sadiq Salam, including Danjuma Ibrahim himself, were acquitted. This happened in March of 2017 after 12 long years of court hearings and emotional torture for the families of the deceased. One of the accused, who was the divisional police officer, the DPO at Garki police station, that's Abdusalam Othman, the one who supervised the dastard act at his police station that fateful morning, vanished into thin air. He disappeared when he was released to pray at a mosque at the first headquarters in Abuja. He just basically disappeared from the 5th floor where all the accused persons were held at the time. So till this day, we do not know what has become of him. No one knows where Othman Abdusalam is at this point. Did someone silence him, or did he run away on his own volition to avoid prosecution? We may never know. Now, the disgusting part of this case was that the then Deputy Commissioner of Police, Danjuma Ibrahim, who had orchestrated all of this and set all of this in motion, the one who gave the direct order for the Apo 6 to be eliminated, was found not guilty. The judge said he just didn't find the evidence provided as sufficient. What does that even mean? It was like a slap in the face of justice, The families of the deceased were angry at this ruling. They opposed and rejected the judgment. They decided to immediately appeal. But before you know what was happening, guys, the police reinstated Danjuma Ibrahim. Like, what were they thinking? The then Commissioner of Police approved this reinstatement, He reinstated an officer who ordered that 6 innocent souls be wasted for his own selfish reasons. That is not all. All of Ibrahim Danjuma's salary, that's the accrued one from 2005, were paid to him in full. He was also set on a refresher course and he got double promotion from Deputy Commissioner of Police to Commissioner of Police, then to Assistant Inspector General of Police in December of 2017. Like, everything was just happening very swiftly for him. Meanwhile, the families of the deceased were livid. Who would not be? How can this be happening? Why is this man being celebrated instead of being held accountable for his actions? The families all came together and tried to fight more. They wanted to appeal, but nothing has come of it because the Chief Justice of the Federation at the time denied their right to appeal. So what more could they do at the time? There was nothing they could do, and there's still nothing they can do right now. So, to keep the memories of the deceased alive, they hold a yearly vigil at the spot which used to be the police checkpoint where their lives were cut short. The families are still fighting for compensation. The compensation that was awarded them way back in 2005 was about, I think, 3 million naira or so. Some reports say they weren't even paid the said amount. Their lawyer tried to get the compensation to 200 million. He stated that the guys whose lives were taken were breadwinners of their various families, so their families actually deserved better compensation. That's why they were asking for the 2 million naira, but he didn't succeed. Yet, the people who orchestrated all of this, the people who did all of this are doing well and living well without care in the world. This case is very, saddening. It took 12 full years to get judgment. Basically, justice was not only delayed, it was also denied. Augustina was just 22 years old when her life was cut short. Her boyfriend Ifeanyi was 25 years old at the time. If they were to be alive, probably they'll, be happily married with kids. But for the trigger-happy policemen who didn't allow them to live their lives. Chinedu Menuru's father passed away from shock upon getting the news of what had happened to his son. It's just, so sad. It's very sad what happened to the Apo 6 and how justice was miscarried. But what can one do? Like I said earlier, it's Nigeria and anything goes basically. So that's it for today's case, guys. Please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video, and thank you for watching till the very end. I really do appreciate. Until next video, stay safe.